When I walked through the front door of my parents' house that afternoon, I never expected to hear my name whispered like a dirty secret. I'd come by unannounced, arms full of groceries, thinking I'd surprise them with their favorite pasta for dinner, the kind Mom used to make when I was a kid. But as I stepped inside, I froze, hearing their voices carry from the living room. "I just don't know how much longer we can keep pretending," my father said, his voice lower than usual. "Allie is a pathetic disappointment. She may pay the bills, but that doesn't make up for her being a failure in every other way." My heart stopped. I almost dropped the grocery bags right there. I could hear the soft clinking of teacups as my mother replied, utterly calm. "Well, at least her money keeps us comfortable. She knows she owes us for everything we've done for her. It's the least she can do." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I stood motionless, staring at the hallway wall as if it could somehow explain why my parents, the very people I had worked so hard to support, were tearing me apart behind my back. Every word felt like a dagger, reopening old wounds I thought I had long since healed. I'd always known they weren't the most affectionate parents. My achievements had never been enough. No promotion was ever impressive enough, no gesture generous enough. But this wasn't criticism. This was contempt. I slowly backed out of the door, careful not to make a sound. The groceries were still in my car, forgotten. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with fragments of their conversation. Pathetic disappointment. At least her money keeps us comfortable. Those words echoed like cruel chants. I couldn't stop hearing them. For the past 5 years, I had quietly paid for nearly everything. Their mortgage, utilities, even their vacations. After my father's construction business went under and my mother retired early due to stress, I stepped up. I was 26 when I took on the responsibility, working my way up as a project manager at a tech firm, pulling overtime, living below my means. Also, my parents could keep the house I grew up in, enjoy dinners out, and never worry about bills. They had no idea how much I sacrificed. And yet, there they were, sitting in the home I paid for, ridiculing me. That evening, I sat on my couch staring at the financial spreadsheet I updated religiously. Every dollar spent, every bill covered. I scrolled through the numbers, and for the first time, I didn't feel proud. I felt like a fool. I kept replaying the scene in my head, hoping I had misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about someone else? Maybe it was out of context? Maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded. But I knew better. Deep down, I had always felt like their support was conditional. They only saw value in me when I was handing them money. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the truth surfacing. The next morning, I woke up hoping it was all a bad dream, but the weight in my chest said otherwise. I spent the whole day at work struggling to focus, fighting the urge to just drive back to their house and demand an explanation. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. I needed answers. I couldn't go another day pretending everything was fine. So I called them. My father answered on the second ring. "Allie, sweetheart," he said, the usual warm facade in place. I took a shaky breath. "Dad, I heard what you said yesterday," I began, my voice barely steady. "I was there. I heard you both." There was a long pause on the line. Then, to my disbelief, my mother grabbed the phone and laughed. Not nervously, but genuinely, as if I had just told a joke. "Well," she said, voice sharp, "it's true, isn't it? You've never lived up to what we expected. You owe us everything, Allie. You know that." That was it. At that exact moment, something inside me shifted. Years of guilt, obligation, and blind loyalty dissolved like sugar in hot water. I didn't even hang up. I simply set the phone down on the table and sat there in silence. The house felt colder. Empty. But for once, the silence wasn't unbearable. It was liberating. For the first time, I knew what I had to do. The next few days passed in a fog. I went through the motions, work, errands, emails. But it was as if I was watching someone else live my life. The only thing that felt real was the echo of my mother's laughter in those words. You owe us everything. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every sacrifice I had made since I was 26. The times I'd skipped vacations, said no to friends, worked 60-hour weeks. Also, my parents could live comfortably without fear of losing their home. Every birthday present, every dinner I treated them to, every utility bill quietly paid. I hadn't been helping out of obligation. I did it out of love. But love, apparently, was a one-way street. On the third night, I found myself scrolling through old emails and texts, reading past conversations with them. It wasn't the first time they had dismissed me, belittled me, or made me feel like less. It was just the first time I had really heard it. My mother's passive-aggressive remarks about my small promotion at work. My father's jokes about how at least Thomas would have stayed to help with the family business, even though Thomas, my brother, hadn't spoken to them in years. I had been blind, excusing it all under the banner of that's just how they are. But hearing them call me a disappointment, without knowing I was listening, stripped away every illusion. This wasn't just how they were. This was how they truly felt. By the end of the week, I had made a quiet but firm decision. I was done. I wasn't going to make a scene or beg for their love. I wasn't even going to confront them again. They had shown me who they were, and this time I believed them. I opened my budgeting app and canceled every automatic payment linked to their accounts. Mortgage, utilities, credit cards, even the prepaid cell phone plan I had been quietly covering since Dad's business collapsed. I stared at the screen as the confirmation emails rolled in. It felt both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't their ATM. I was just me. That night, I called my closest friend, Eva. She had always warned me that my parents took advantage of me, but I had stubbornly defended them. When I told her what happened, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just listened, then said gently, "Allie, you don't have to keep paying for people who don't even see you." I cried harder than I had in years. The next morning, as if the universe could sense the shift, I got a text from my mother. "Sweetheart, we've noticed a few things aren't going through this month. Did you change banks? Call me when you get a chance." No apology, no acknowledgement of what they said. Just business as usual. I didn't reply. A few hours later, Dad tried. "Hey, Allie, your mom's worried. Some payments are missing. Can you check?" Still no apology. Just a concern about their precious payments. I let the message sit there, unread. The silence on my end seemed to unnerve them. Over the next few days, I got more texts, voicemails, and even an email from my dad, the man who hated technology, titled, "Urgent, please respond." Each message grew slightly more frantic. "Allie, we're just worried about you. Did you forget the mortgage? We know you're busy with work. Please don't be stubborn. We need to talk." I wasn't being stubborn. I was being free. When Sunday came, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took the entire day for myself. No errands, no work emails, no family obligations. I went to the park, brought a book I hadn't had time to read, and just existed. It felt strange at first, like I was forgetting something important. But slowly, it started to feel right. The text didn't stop, though. That evening, as I sat by the lake watching the sunset, I got another message from Mom. This time it read, "Call us when you can." We didn't mean it. I stared at those words for a long time. We didn't mean it. Did they think this was just about words? That I could unhear them calling me a failure? That I could forget the years of dismissiveness, the entitlement, the conditional love? They hadn't just slipped up in the heat of the moment. They said those things when they thought I wasn't listening. When they were relaxed, honest, unfiltered. I closed my phone without replying. They meant every word they said. And now so did I. I thought the silence would bring me guilt. I expected the sleepless nights, the urge to apologize even when I knew I had done nothing wrong. That was the pattern I had fallen into for years. They would push, I would bend. They would hurt me and I would find a way to forgive them just to keep the peace. But the silence didn't bring guilt. It brought relief. Days turned into a week, and still, I didn't respond. I ignored every text, call, and voicemail. I watched as their tone shifted from concerned to irritated, and eventually to desperate. By the second week, my mother's messages were sounding more frantic. "Allie, why aren't you answering? Your father and I are worried sick. We've been good to you. Don't throw away your family over one silly misunderstanding. The mortgage is late and the bank is calling. Please, sweetheart." There it was. The real reason behind their concern. Not me. Not my well-being. But the mortgage. The money. Every time I saw their messages, I could almost hear their voices as they sat comfortably in the house I paid for, still believing they were entitled to everything I had built. Still pretending that the words they said meant nothing. Still thinking that throwing around the word family would automatically grant them forgiveness. But I didn't feel forgiving. I felt betrayed. Eva invited me over that Friday night. She made tea, knowing I hadn't been sleeping much. We sat on her couch, surrounded by candles and soft music, a sharp contrast to the turmoil inside me. "I don't know how to explain it," I confessed, holding the warm mug in both hands. "It's like I'm grieving them, but they're still alive." Eva nodded, understanding instantly. "You are. You're grieving the parents you thought you had, or hoped they could be." I blinked back tears. She was right. I had spent years hoping they would change, that the next time I helped them, the next time I sacrificed, it would finally be enough to make them proud. But it never was. And it never would be. "They said it so easily, Ava, like it wasn't even the first time," I whispered, like they'd been saying it all along when I wasn't around. "You deserve better," she said firmly. "And you know it." I did. And the strange thing was, realizing it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It felt necessary. The next day, I checked my emails and found one that made my stomach drop. "Final notice. Mortgage payment overdue. Immediate action required." I stared at it, realizing that for the first time in years, my parents were facing the consequences of their own choices, and I wasn't swooping in to save them. An hour later, another voicemail came through from my father. His voice was sharp now, no longer pretending. "Allie, I don't know what this little stunt is about, but you need to get over whatever nonsense you've conjured up. Your mother and I are under a lot of stress. You're making things harder than they need to be. Call us." I couldn't help but laugh. After everything, I was the one causing stress? Later that evening, my mother called again. This time, she didn't even bother hiding her frustration. "We raised you better than this," she snapped. "Ignoring us, letting the mortgage lapse? We didn't mean what we said. You know how your father gets when he's frustrated? And I was just joking. Stop being so sensitive and call us back." Sensitive. The word hit harder than I expected. They had always used it to dismiss me. Every hurt feeling, every boundary I tried to set was labeled as me being too sensitive. But I wasn't sensitive. I was done. I closed my eyes and pictured them sitting in the living room, panicking as they received calls from the bank. I could almost hear my father blaming my mother blaming me, both too proud to admit the truth. That without me, they couldn't afford the life they'd built. And I was okay with that. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. On Sunday, Eva and I went for brunch. As we sat on the patio watching people pass by, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. "Allie, we didn't mean it. Please just call us. We need you." But this time there was something different about it. It wasn't just desperation, it was fear. And somehow that didn't bother me. It almost felt fair. Eva noticed me staring at my phone. "Are you going to answer them?" I shook my head. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew. This was just the beginning. By the end of the second month, the silence was no longer something I feared. It was something I owned. My parents, on the other hand, were unraveling. I could see it in the frequency of their calls, the increasingly frantic voicemails, the passive-aggressive emails that piled up like junk mail I never asked for. They couldn't understand why I wasn't rushing in to save them like I always had. Why wasn't their good little daughter stepping up to patch the cracks they had long pretended didn't exist? They weren't used to this version of me, the version that didn't bend. Ava noticed it too. "You seem lighter," she said one evening as we walked through the park, leaves crunching beneath our feet. "Like you're finally breathing." "I am," I admitted. "For the first time, I don't feel like I owe anyone anything." Still, part of me wondered when the real panic would start. The mortgage wasn't just overdue. It was on the verge of foreclosure. The bank had likely already begun the process, and knowing my parents, they'd been ignoring the calls until it became impossible. That impossibility arrived the next day. My phone rang while I was at work. I ignored it like I had every call from them lately, but when I checked the voicemail later, my father's voice sounded different. Tight. Desperate. "Allie, please. The bank. We're losing the house. They've started foreclosure proceedings. We didn't mean what we said. We were just upset. It wasn't about you. Please, just call us." I stared at the screen, unmoved. It was about me. It had always been about me. About their disappointment that I wasn't who they wanted me to be. About their entitlement to everything I had worked for. The fact that they only reached out now when they were drowning financially told me everything I needed to know. Later that night, as I scrolled mindlessly through social media, I got another message. This time from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Aunt Carol. Your mom is a mess, Allie. Just call her. Family sticks together." I clenched my jaw. Family sticks together. The phrase that had been weaponized against me my entire life. But family, I realized, didn't mean enabling. It didn't mean sacrificing yourself so others could thrive while calling you a disappointment. I didn't reply. Days passed. More relatives started reaching out. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions about how I should forgive and forget. Each one pleaded their case, but none of them knew the full story. They hadn't heard the words that I had. They hadn't sat alone on their couch, listening to their parents label them as nothing more than a wallet with feelings. When I didn't respond, the guilt campaign shifted into threats. It started small. My father emailed me a link to a local article about how difficult it was for people over 60 to find affordable housing, underlined with, "Is this what you really want for your parents?" Then my mother took it a step further. "If you don't help us, people will know. Your friends, your boss. Do you want them to know how selfish you are? After all we've done for you?" I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I hadn't expected them to go there. To threaten my reputation. And yet, deep down, I wasn't surprised. This was who they really were, when the mask finally slipped. I forwarded the email to Eva without a word. She called me immediately. "Allie, you need to protect yourself. Don't let them twist this around." "I won't," I said, steady. "Not this time." I pulled up my employee portal and began gathering everything I needed. Pay stubs, emails, even performance reviews. I wasn't naive. If they were willing to smear me to family, they might try to reach further. I wasn't going to let them. By the end of the week, another message arrived from my mother, this time sounding less like a threat and more like a plea. "We didn't mean it, Allie. We were stressed. It was a bad day. Please don't let this ruin everything. You're our daughter. You're supposed to help us." But their words didn't touch me anymore. The damage had been done. Not just with what they said that day, but with every little dismissal, every expectation that I'd fund their lives, every guilt trip, and every moment I'd spent thinking I was the problem. They could dress it up however they wanted now, but the truth was simple. I wasn't their safety net anymore. And whether they wanted to admit it or not, they were about to fall. The final unraveling came faster than I expected. A week after their last desperate voicemail, I got a call from Aunt Carol again. This time, she sounded frantic. "Allie, they're losing the house. They only have a few weeks left before it's auctioned. Your father is beside himself, and your mother, she's in tears. Please, you have to step in. I listened quietly, staring at the ceiling as I lay on my couch. The version of me from months ago would have been pacing the room, heart pounding, scrambling to figure out how to save them. But now, I felt detached. Sad, yes, but also certain. I had already stepped in. For years, I had saved them from this exact scenario more times than I could count. But instead of gratitude, they gave me disdain. Aunt Carol, I said carefully, I'm sorry, but I'm not getting involved. There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp intake of breath. Allie, they're still your parents. They made mistakes, sure, but family is family. I know, I said. And that's why I gave them more than I ever should have. But I can't keep sacrificing myself for people who only love me when it's convenient. Before she could reply, I ended the call. I wasn't ready to hear the familiar chorus of, but they're family anymore. I had played that record too many times. Over the next few days, the situation spiraled. I started receiving emails directly from the bank, likely because I was still listed as a prior point of contact. The house was officially in foreclosure. Notices had been posted on the property. I imagined my parents, shocked to find the familiar red-lettered paper pinned to their front door. Part of me felt guilty, but guilt had been my default for too long. Instead, I reminded myself of the countless times I'd pulled them back from the edge, only to be rewarded with sneers behind my back. They hadn't just made a mistake. They had shown me their true colors. Then came the message that made my stomach turn. Allie, my father wrote in a cold, clipped email, if you don't fix this, you'll regret it. You owe us. We're your parents, and you don't get to abandon us like this. Remember who paid for your education. Remember who raised you. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from the sheer audacity. They didn't pay for my education. I had. I'd worked 2 jobs, taken student loans, and when my parents' checks bounced during my junior year of college, I covered the shortfall myself. I had never even asked them to repay me. I scrolled through my archived emails and pulled up the payment receipts, proof of every dime I had scraped together to stay in school. I sat there in stunned silence, realizing just how deeply they had rewritten history to suit their narrative. They never paid for me. They never really supported me. The next day, the final straw arrived. A voicemail left by my mother, voice trembling between tears and anger. I hope you're happy, Allie. We're going to lose everything. The house, the cars, it's all falling apart. Is that what you wanted? For your parents to be homeless? You're pathetic, just like we always said. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Not because they were new, but because they were familiar. This wasn't new behavior. This was just the first time I wasn't numbing myself enough to ignore it. They weren't sorry for what they said. They were sorry for the consequences. I played the voicemail for Eva that evening, tears rolling silently down my face. You don't deserve this, she whispered. This isn't love, Allie. This is manipulation. I nodded. I knew she was right. And as painful as it was, the final piece of my decision settled into place. I wouldn't save them. I wasn't just withdrawing my money. I was done being their scapegoat. 2 days later, another email came, short and panicked. Please, Allie, we didn't mean it. Just help us this one last time. We're begging you. I stared at the message for a long time, but I didn't reply. Instead, I quietly began preparing something I should have done a long time ago. Protecting myself, legally and emotionally. Because whether they realized it or not, their safety net was officially gone. And this time, they were going to hit the ground. The day the house officially went into foreclosure, there was no fanfare, no dramatic showdown, no heartfelt apology. Just a sterile notification email from the bank stating the inevitable. The property would be auctioned within 30 days unless the outstanding balance was paid in full. I knew they couldn't pay it. Without me, they were exposed to reality. The reality I had been shielding them from for years. I thought I would feel some sort of satisfaction, watching everything fall apart. But the truth was, it wasn't satisfying. It was just quiet. a quiet I hadn't known since I was a child. For once, I wasn't frantically solving someone else's problems. A few days later, Ava and I went out for coffee. She slid a manila folder across the table. "I spoke to a lawyer, like you asked," she said. "Everything's ready. If they try anything, smear your name, show up at work, or harass you, you're covered." I nodded, staring at the folder without opening it. The heaviness in my chest was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't fear or guilt anymore. It was simply the weight of moving on. I finally said it out loud. "They're going to lose the house." Ava didn't flinch. They chose this. And deep down, I knew it was true. The next call came the following weekend. This time it was my father, and his voice was unrecognizable, cracked, broken, nothing like the intimidating figure I had grown up with. "Allie, please, please don't do this. We didn't mean it. You know we didn't mean it. We were upset, we were stressed, but we need you. We need you." For a brief second, I almost answered. The part of me that still craved their approval. The child in me who wanted her parents to finally love her the way she had always wanted. Almost picked up that phone. But I didn't. Because I finally understood. They hadn't reached out to apologize after hurting me. They reached out when the money stopped. They didn't need me. They needed what I gave them. I spent the rest of the day boxing up old family photo albums, cards, trinkets, things I had kept out of some sense of loyalty. But as I placed them in a donation pile, I realized something. All these years, I thought cutting ties with them would leave me empty. Instead, I felt lighter with every box I sealed. 2 weeks later, the house was officially listed for auction. Word spread fast. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years flooded my phone. "How could you abandon your parents like this? They sacrificed so much for you. This is unforgivable." Each message tried to pull me back into the role I had always played. The peacemaker, the fixer, the obedient daughter who took care of everyone but herself. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. The real turning point came when my mother herself showed up at my office building. I watched her from the safety of the security cameras as she pleaded with the receptionist to let her upstairs. When security escorted her out, she looked around frantically as if searching for someone to make it all stop. It wasn't me. Later that afternoon, I found a handwritten note taped to the windshield of my car. "Please, Allie, we can fix this. Don't do this to your family." I folded the note carefully and threw it in the trash. On the night before the auction, I sat on the floor of my apartment, sipping tea, staring at the city lights beyond my window. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I simply felt free. Eva called. "They're still trying to reach you," she said gently. "You okay?" "I am," I replied. And for the first time, I meant it. The house sold the next morning to a young couple who looked ecstatic as they held the keys. I watched the announcement online, knowing that chapter of my life had closed. My parents moved into a small rental apartment on the other side of town. I didn't know the details. I didn't ask. I only knew what little I heard through others. And I didn't need to know more. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about finally choosing me. 3 months later, standing in my quiet apartment, surrounded by my own furniture, my own peace, and my own rules, I realized something. I hadn't lost my family. They had lost me. And strangely enough, that was the most empowering thing I had ever done. Sometimes walking away isn't about punishment. It's about survival. And I had survived.